The space station called Threshold 9 was a place where many species came to trade and do business. It floated in the darkness between stars, and thousands of beings walked through its metal hallways every day. Some were tall, some were small, some had scales, and some had fur. But all of them knew one simple rule: stay away from the Warbeast. Vorak stood 9 feet tall. His body was covered in thick scales the color of dried blood. He had 4 arms, each one ending in claws that could tear through metal. 2 massive tusks curved up from his jaw, and his eyes were the yellow of dying suns. He was a Corvani, and his people were bred for one purpose only: war. The Corvani did not know fear. They did not know love. They did not know mercy. These things had been removed from their blood many generations ago. The Corvani were weapons that walked and talked, and Vorak was one of the deadliest among them. He had killed 17 beings in legal combat. He carried the scars of 100 battles on his armored skin. When he walked through the market district of the station, every other species moved out of his way. They did not look at his face. They did not speak to him. They simply ran. Vorak did not care. He felt nothing about their fear. He felt nothing about anything. That was how he was made. On this day, he was walking through the lower market when he saw something unusual. A human male was standing at a supply vendor with a small human child beside him. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only joined the Galactic Dominion a few decades ago, and most species still did not know much about them. They were soft. They were weak. They had no claws, no scales, no natural weapons of any kind. Vorak did not understand how they had survived long enough to reach the stars. The human male was named Daniel Price. He was a freight hauler who moved cargo between colonies. He was not a soldier or a fighter. He was just a man trying to make a living and raise his daughter alone. His wife had died 3 years ago from a sickness that the doctors could not cure. Now it was just him and his little girl. Emma was 6 years old. She had brown hair that she wore in 2 braids, and her eyes were the color of Earth's sky. She was small, even for a human child, and she looked at the alien station around her with wonder instead of fear. While her father talked to the vendor, she watched the strange beings walk past. A creature with 6 legs and blue skin scurried by, and Emma waved at it. The creature made a confused sound and hurried away. Daniel looked down at his daughter and smiled. She was brave, his little girl. Braver than him, sometimes. He finished his business with the vendor and took her hand. They did not see the 3 figures following them. The smugglers had been watching Daniel since he arrived. They knew he carried payment for his cargo supplies. They knew he was alone except for the child. They waited until he turned into a quiet corridor, and then they moved. The first one grabbed Daniel from behind. The second one hit him in the stomach. Daniel fell to his knees, gasping for air. Emma screamed and tried to run to him, but the third smuggler blocked her path. Vorak heard the sounds from 50 meters away. He did not care. Robbery was common on the station. It was not his business. He kept walking. Then the child screamed again. It was not a scream of anger or surprise. It was a scream of pure terror. Emma watched as the smugglers kicked her father again and again. She saw blood on his face. She saw him stop moving. And she screamed because she thought her daddy was going to die, and she would be all alone. The sound hit Vorak like a blade through his chest. He stopped walking. His 4 hands clenched into fists. Something was happening inside him, something he did not understand. The child's cry echoed in his ears, and he felt his heart beating faster. This was wrong. He should not feel anything. He was Corvani. He was a weapon, but his feet were already moving. The smugglers did not see him coming. One moment they were standing over Daniel's body, laughing at how easy the job had been. The next moment, Vorak was there. He grabbed the first smuggler and threw him into the wall with enough force to crack the metal. The second smuggler pulled out a knife, and Vorak broke his arm with a single motion. The third one tried to run, but Vorak caught him by the neck and lifted him off the ground. The smuggler made choking sounds. Vorak could kill him easily. He should kill him. That was what weapons did, but he did not. He dropped the smuggler and watched him crawl away with his companions. They would live. Vorak did not know why he had let them live. He had never shown mercy before. He did not even know what mercy felt like. Then he heard the crying. Emma was curled in the corner of the corridor. Her small body was shaking, and tears ran down her face. She was looking at her father, who was still not moving. She was so scared that she could not even scream anymore. She could only cry. Vorak stared at her. Every instinct told him to leave. The weak were not his concern. He had done enough by stopping the robbery. There was no reason to stay, but he could not move. Her tears affected him in a way that enemy fire and blade wounds never had. Looking at this small, fragile creature weeping for her father, Vorak felt something crack open inside his chest. It was painful. It was confusing. It was something the Corvani were never supposed to feel. He took one step toward her, then another. Anna looked up at the massive monster approaching her, and her crying became louder. She was afraid of him. Of course she was afraid. Everything was afraid of him. Vorak knelt down, bringing his terrible face closer to her level. He did not know what to do. He did not know how to comfort a child. He had never tried to comfort anyone in his entire life. So he simply stayed there, a mountain of scales and claws and tusks, kneeling beside a crying human girl while her father bled on the cold station floor. And for the first time in his existence, Vorak the Warbeast was afraid. Not of death, not of battle. He was afraid because he did not understand what was happening to him. He was afraid because something in this child's tears had woken a part of him that should have been dead. The medical bay of Threshold 9 was bright and clean. Machines beeped softly as they monitored the patients inside. The doctors here had treated many species over the years. They had seen wounds from blasters and blades, from teeth and claws. But they had never seen anything like what walked through their doors that night. Vorak carried Daniel Price in his arms like the human weighed nothing at all. The man was still unconscious, and blood dripped from his wounds onto the white floor. Behind the Warbeast, walking on small and shaking legs, was Emma. Her face was red from crying, and she held onto the edge of Vorak's armored leg as they moved. The doctors froze when they saw him. One of them dropped a medical tool, and it clattered loudly in the silence. A Corvani Warbeast was standing in their medical bay. This was not possible. The Corvani did not help people. They only hurt them. Vorak placed Daniel on the nearest bed. His yellow eyes moved to the doctors, and they all took a step back. "Fix him," Vorak said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. The doctors did not argue. They rushed to Daniel's side and began working on his injuries. They were too scared to ask questions. They were too scared to do anything except obey. Vorak stepped back and watched them work. He did not know why he had brought the human here. He did not know why he was still here instead of walking away. Nothing about this night made sense to him. Emma tugged on his leg. He looked down at her. "Is my daddy going to be okay?" she asked. Her voice was small and broken from crying. Vorak did not know what to say. He had never answered such a question before. "The doctors will try," he finally said. It was not a comforting answer, but it was honest. Emma seemed to accept it. She sat down on the floor next to his feet, pulled her knees to her chest, and stared at her father across the room. The hours passed slowly. Station security arrived at some point. They stood at the door of the medical bay and looked at Vorak with fear in their eyes. They asked him questions about what had happened. He answered with as few words as possible. The smugglers had attacked the humans. He had stopped them. That was all. The security officers left quickly. They did not want to be near him any longer than necessary. When the doctors finished their work, the lead physician approached Vorak with shaking hands. "The human will live," she said. "But he needs rest. Many days of rest. His injuries were serious." Vorak nodded once. The physician hurried away. Emma had fallen asleep on the floor. Her small body was curled up in a ball, and her breathing was slow and peaceful. Looking at her, Vorak felt that strange pain in his chest again. She was so small, so fragile. How did humans survive when their children were this helpless? A memory came to him then, rising up from a place he thought had been destroyed long ago. He was young, barely old enough to walk. A female Kavani was holding him in her arms. She was warm, and her voice was soft as she spoke words he could not remember. He felt safe. He felt loved. Then the memory shifted. Other Kavani were taking him away from her. She was screaming, reaching for him with her clawed hands. But they held her back. A Kavani who showed affection to her offspring was defective. She had to be removed. Vorak never saw her again. He had not thought about that memory in decades. The conditioning was supposed to erase such things. But now, looking at this sleeping human child, the memory had returned. And with it came an emotion he had no name for. Emma stirred and opened her eyes. She looked around, confused at first, and then she saw Vorak still standing there. She did not scream. She did not run. She simply looked up at him with her big blue eyes. "You stayed," she said. Double quotes. "Yes," Vorak replied. "Why?" He did not have an answer. Emma got to her feet slowly. Her legs were stiff from sleeping on the hard floor. She walked over to where her father lay sleeping and touched his hand gently. Then she came back to Vorak and sat down next to his feet again. "What is your name?" she asked. The question surprised him. When was the last time anyone had asked his name? Most beings simply called him beast or monster or Korvani. They did not care about his name. They only cared about staying away from him. "Vorak," he said. Emma tried to repeat it. Vora. She frowned. The sounds were hard for her small human mouth to make. "Can I call you Vor?" No one had ever given him a short name before. No one had ever been close enough to him to need one. He should have told her no. He should have told her that he was not her friend and that she should stop talking to him. Instead, he said, "Yes." Emma smiled. It was a small smile, tired and sad, but it was real. "Thank you for saving my daddy, Vel." Vorak did not know what to say to that either. So he said nothing. The night continued. Emma fell asleep again, this time leaning against his leg. Her small hand rested on his armored scales, and she did not seem to mind how cold and hard they were. Vorak looked down at her and wondered what was wrong with this child. Did she not understand what he was? Did she not know that he was dangerous? But then he realized something. She did know. She had seen him throw those smugglers like they were toys. She had watched him break a man's arm without effort. She knew exactly what he was capable of, and she was still here. The Kovani had taught him that fear was weakness. When you were afraid, you were vulnerable. You could be controlled. You could be destroyed. That was why they removed fear from their blood. That was why they felt nothing. But this child had been terrified. She had screamed and cried and shaken with fear. And then, after all of that, she had trusted him. She had followed him to the medical bay. She had sat beside him through the long night. She had asked his name and smiled at him. Her fear had not made her weak. Her fear had been honest. And her ability to move past that fear, to trust someone who should have been her enemy, that was something Vorak had never seen before. That was something strong. As the station's artificial lights began to brighten for the morning cycle, Vorak made a decision. He did not understand it. He could not explain it. But he knew it was right. He would stay with these humans until a father was healed. He would protect them. And maybe, if he was very careful, he would learn what this strange feeling in his chest meant. 3 days passed. Daniel Price remained in the medical bay, sleeping most of the time as his body healed. The doctor said he would recover fully, but he needed at least 2 more weeks of rest. Until then, someone had to take care of Emma. The station authorities came to Vorak with this problem. They stood at a safe distance, their voices shaking as they explained that the child had no other family on the station. They would need to place her in temporary custody until her father could care for her again. Vorak listened to them speak. He watched Emma sitting by her father's bed, holding his hand and talking to him, even though he could not hear her. She was telling him about the food she had eaten that morning. She was telling him that the doctors were nice. She was telling him not to worry because Vio was taking care of her. "I will be her guardian," Vorak said. The station authorities stared at him. They looked at each other. They looked back at him. None of them said what they were all thinking, that this was impossible, that a Kervani Warbeast could not take care of a human child, that this went against everything they knew about his species, but none of them were brave enough to argue with him. "Very well," the lead official said weakly. "You will be responsible for the child until her father recovers." Vorak nodded once, and the officials practically ran out of the room. That was how Vorak became a guardian. He did not know how to be one. He had never taken care of anything in his entire life. He only knew how to fight, how to kill, how to survive. But Emma did not seem to notice his confusion. She simply accepted him as her protector and followed him wherever he went. The first challenge was food. Emma was hungry, and Vorak did not know what humans ate. He took her to the market district and watched as she looked at the different vendors. She pointed at something that looked like a sandwich, and he bought it for her. She ate it happily, making small sounds of enjoyment that Vorak found strangely pleasant to hear. The second challenge was sleep. Emma could not sleep in the medical bay anymore. Vorak had a small room that the Merchant Guild provided for him. It was not meant for a child. It was barely meant for anyone. But Emma did not complain. She curled up on his hard bed and fell asleep within minutes. Vorak did not sleep that night. He sat in the corner and watched over her, his yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. On the 4th day, the trouble began. The smugglers that Vorak had defeated belonged to a larger group called the Crimson Circuit. They were a syndicate that operated across many stations, dealing in stolen goods and illegal weapons. When they heard that their men had been beaten by a Corvani who was now protecting a human child, they were angry. More than angry. They were insulted. A Warbeast showing mercy. A Warbeast protecting the weak. This was wrong. This was an opportunity. Word spread through the station's underworld. There was a bounty on Vorak and the human girl. Anyone who could bring them to the Crimson Circuit would be rewarded greatly. The station that once feared Vorak now saw him as a target. The predator had become prey. Vorak sensed the change immediately. He noticed the looks from shadows, the whispers that stopped when he walked by, the feeling of being watched. He had been the hunter for so long that he knew exactly what it felt like to be hunted. He did not tell Emma. She was too young to understand. Instead, he simply became more careful. He chose different routes through the station. He kept his 4 hands ready for combat at all times. He made sure Emma was never more than an arm's length away from him. Emma noticed that something was different. "Why do people keep looking at us, Vale?" she asked one afternoon. "They are curious," he said. It was not a complete lie. Emma accepted this answer. She was holding his hand, or rather, she was holding one of his massive fingers. Her small hand could not wrap around anything bigger. They walked through the market together, and Emma looked at everything with wide eyes. "Vel, what is that?" she asked, pointing at a vendor selling strange fruit. "I do not know. Can we try some?" He bought her the fruit. It was purple and tasted sweet. Emma smiled as she ate it, and some of the juice ran down her chin. Vorak found himself doing something he had never done before. He wiped her face with his claw, very gently, careful not to scratch her soft human skin. That night, Emma could not sleep. She sat on the bed and looked at Vorak with serious eyes. "Vor, can I tell you something?" "Yes, my mommy went to the stars." "That is what Daddy says." "It means she died." Emma's voice was quiet. "I miss her a lot. Sometimes I'm scared that Daddy will go to the stars too, and I will be all alone." Vorak did not know what to say. Death was not something the Corvani discussed. Death was simply the end of function. It meant nothing to them. But looking at Emma's sad face, Vorak understood that it meant something to her. It meant everything. "You will not be alone," he said. The words came out before he could stop them. Emma looked up at him. "Promise?" A Corvani did not make promises. Promises were for beings who cared about the future. Vorak had never cared about anything beyond the next battle, but now he had something to care about. Someone to care about. "I promise," he said. Emma smiled and lay down on the bed. Within minutes, she was asleep. Vorak sat in his corner and thought about what he had just done. He had made a promise to protect a human child. He had made himself responsible for her future. This was madness. This went against everything he was designed to be, but it felt right. On the 7th day, a message arrived at his room. It was written in the old Corvani battle language, and it said only this: "You have become soft, brother. The circuit has hired me to prove it. I am coming for you and the human meat. Prepare yourself." The message was signed with a name that Vorak knew well, Drekther, one of the most vicious assassins his species had ever produced. Vorak looked at Emma, who was drawing pictures on a piece of paper she had found. She was drawing her father, herself, and a large figure with 4 arms. She was drawing their family. The Warbeast, who once feared nothing, now felt cold dread settle into his hearts. Not for himself, for her. Vorak knew that running was not an option. Drekther was one of the best trackers among the Corvani. No matter where Vorak went, the assassin would find him. The only choice was to fight, to end this threat before it could reach Emma. But he could not leave her alone. The station was full of enemies now, and any one of them might try to collect the bounty. So Vorak made a plan. He would take Emma to the lower decks, where the maintenance tunnels offered many places to hide. If something happened to him, she could find her way back to the medical bay. She could find her father. He did not tell her why they were going down there. But she could find her father. He did not tell her why they were going down there. He told her they were exploring, that he wanted to show her something interesting. Emma believed him because she trusted him, and that trust made the cold feeling in his chest even worse. They entered the lower decks through a service entrance. The lights down here were dim, and the air smelled of oil and metal. Machines hummed in the walls, keeping the station alive. Emma held tightly to Vorak's finger as they walked through the narrow corridors. "It is dark down here," she said. Her voice was small, but not afraid. "Yes," Vorak agreed. "Stay close to me." They walked for 10 minutes before Drekther appeared. The assassin stepped out of the shadows like a nightmare made real. He was almost as large as Vorak, with darker scales and eyes that glowed red instead of yellow. His 4 arms ended in claws that had been sharpened to impossible points. He wore the marks of the Corvani death caste, symbols carved into his scales that showed how many he had killed. Emma saw him and gasped. She pressed herself against Vorak's leg, her whole body shaking. "So it is true," Drekther said. His voice was like broken glass. The mighty Vorak has become a nursemaid. How far you have fallen, brother. Vorak pushed Emma behind him gently. Go, he said to her. Hide, now. Emma looked up at him with terrified eyes. But Vio, go. She ran. Her small feet made quick sounds on the metal floor as she disappeared around a corner. Vorak watched her go, and then he turned to face the assassin. You let her run, Drekthar laughed. You could have used her as a shield. A true Corvani would have. But you have forgotten what you are. I know exactly what I am, Vorak said. They charged at each other. The fight was brutal and fast. Drekthar was younger and had been enhanced by the circuit with illegal combat drugs. His claws moved like lightning, and each strike carried enough force to crack bone. But Vorak had something the assassin did not have, a reason to win. They traded blows in the narrow corridor. Metal sparked where their claws met. Blood began to flow from cuts on both their bodies. Drekthar was fast, but Vorak was experienced. He had fought in wars that Drekthar had only heard stories about, but the assassin had one advantage. He did not care if he died. He fought with no fear and no hesitation. Every attack was meant to kill, even if it meant leaving himself open. Vorak felt claws tear through his side. The pain was immense, but he did not stop. He grabbed Drekthar's arm and twisted until he heard it snap. The assassin screamed but kept fighting, using his other 3 arms to slash at Vorak's chest and face. More blood. More pain. Vorak was slowing down. His wounds were taking their toll. Drekthar saw his chance. He kicked Vorak hard in the chest, and the older warrior fell backward onto the floor. Before he could rise, Drekthar was on top of him, one clawed hand raised for the killing blow. The circuit will reward me well for your head, Drekthar said. And then I will find the child. I will make her death slow, so she understands what happens to those who make weapons forget their purpose. Something hit Drekthar in the side of the head. It was a piece of metal pipe. Thrown by a pair of small human hands. Emma stood at the end of the corridor. Her face was white with fear, but she did not run. She had found the pipe on the floor and thrown it as hard as she could. It had not hurt Drekthar at all. It had barely made him flinch, but it had distracted him for one moment. That was all Vorak needed. His hand shot up and grabbed Drekthar by the throat. With the last of his strength, he pulled the assassin down and drove his tusks through the younger Corvani's chest. Drekthar made a wet, choking sound. His red eyes went dark. His body went still. Vorak pushed the corpse off himself and lay on the cold floor, breathing hard. His vision was blurring. He could feel his blood pooling beneath him. This was bad. This might be the end. Then Emma was there. She fell to her knees beside him, tears streaming down her face. Her small hands touched his scales, trying to find a place that was not wounded. Vio, please do not die, she cried. Please. I need you. Vorak looked at her. This small creature who had thrown a pipe at a Corvani assassin. This child who had been terrified but had acted anyway. He had never seen anything so brave in all his years of war. You were supposed to hide, he said weakly. I could not leave you, she sobbed. You are my friend. Friend. Another word the Corvani did not use. Another thing he had never had. You are brave, little one, he said. Very brave. I was scared, Emma admitted. Vorak managed a small smile, something his face had never done before. Being scared and acting anyway. That is what bravery means. His eyes began to close. Emma screamed his name again, but the sound seemed far away now. Everything was far away. The darkness was coming to take him, and he did not have the strength to fight it. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness took him was Emma's voice, calling for help, begging anyone who could hear to please save her friend. And the last thing he felt was her small hand holding on to his. Refusing to let go. Station security found them like that. a human child covered in Corvani blood, holding the massive clawed hand of a dying Warbeast and crying as though her heart was breaking. None of them had ever seen anything like it. None of them would ever forget it. The doctors did not think Vorak would survive. His wounds were too severe, his blood loss too great. They had never treated a Corvani before, and they did not fully understand his biology. But they tried anyway, because a little girl begged them to save her friend, and because they had seen how that monster had protected her. For 3 days, Vorak floated in darkness. He dreamed of battles he had fought and beings he had killed. He dreamed of the female Corvani, who might have been his mother, reaching for him as they took him away. And he dreamed of Emma, her small hand holding his, her voice telling him not to leave her. On the 4th day, he opened his eyes. Emma was sitting beside his bed. She had not left the medical bay since they brought him in. The doctors had tried to make her eat, make her sleep, but she had refused to go far from his side. When she saw his yellow eyes looking at her, she burst into tears and threw her small arms around his neck. "Vio, you are awake. I thought you were going to die." Vorak did not have the strength to speak yet, but he lifted one of his hands and placed it gently on her back. It was the closest thing to a hug he had ever given anyone. The recovery took many weeks. Vorak had to learn to walk again, to move his 4 arms without pain. Emma stayed with him through all of it. She brought him food, even though he could barely eat. She told him stories about her mother and father, about Earth, about all the places she wanted to see when she grew up. She read to him from a datapad she had borrowed, stumbling over the big words but never giving up. During one of these reading sessions, Vorak realized something that surprised him. He was happy. Not satisfied, not content, but actually happy. He had never felt this emotion before. He had not even known it existed. Daniel Price recovered as well. When he woke and learned everything that had happened, he could not believe it at first. A Corvani Warbeast had saved his daughter, had protected her, had nearly died for her. This was impossible. Everyone knew what the Corvani were, but Daniel was a man who believed what his eyes showed him. And his eyes showed him a 9-foot monster reading bedtime stories to his little girl. And his little girl falling asleep against that monster without any fear at all. The first time Daniel met Vorak properly, he could not find words. He simply stood in the doorway of the medical bay and stared at this terrifying creature who had given everything to keep Emma safe. Finally, he said, "Thank you." Vorak looked at him. "She saved me. I was losing the fight. She distracted my enemy. Without her, I would be dead." Daniel smiled through his tears. "That sounds like my girl." When Vorak was strong enough to leave the medical bay, Daniel came to him with an offer. The freight hauler was getting ready to leave the station, to continue his work moving cargo between colonies. He wanted Vorak to come with them. "We don't out much," Daniel admitted. "Just a small ship and a lot of empty space. But Emma has talked about nothing except you for weeks. She wants you to stay with us. And honestly, so do I. You protected my daughter when I could not. You are part of our family now, whether you like it or not." Vorak did not know how to respond. Family was not a concept the Corvani understood. They were bred in facilities, raised by trainers, and sent to war. They did not have families. They did not have homes. "I am a weapon," Vorak said. "I am not designed for families." Emma appeared at her father's side. She looked up at Vorak with those big blue eyes that had somehow become the most important thing in his universe. "Weapons do not read bedtime stories, Vale," she said. "You read to me every night when I was scared. Weapons do not make promises. You promised I would never be alone. You are not a weapon. You are my friend." Vorak had no argument against that before they could leave. A message arrived from the Corvani High Command. Vorak was declared defective. He had shown emotions that were forbidden. He had protected beings that should have meant nothing to him. For these crimes against his breeding, he was exiled from his species. He was no longer Corvani. He was nothing. Daniel was furious when he heard this. Emma was confused. But Vorak felt nothing except relief. "They gave me nothing but violence," he said. "They took everything from me before I even knew I could have it. Being nothing to them is the greatest freedom they could have given me." The cargo ship was called the Wanderer. It was old and small, with paint peeling off its hull and engines that made strange sounds during jumps. But to Vorak, it was beautiful. It was a home dot as the ship prepared to leave threshold -9. Emma sat next to Vorak in the small common area. She was looking out the window at the stars. "Vio, are you sad about your people?" she asked. "No. Are you scared? About not having them anymore?" Vorak thought about the question carefully. The Corvani had taught him that fear was weakness. They had tried to remove it from his blood, but they had failed. He knew that now. He was capable of fear. He was capable of many things they had tried to destroy. "I am scared," he admitted, "but not of being without them. I am scared of losing you and your father. I am scared because you matter to me, and things that matter can be taken away." Emma nodded seriously, as though this made perfect sense to her. "That is okay, Veror," she said. "I will protect you." She climbed up onto the seat beside him and leaned against his massive arm. Within minutes, she was asleep, trusting him completely, fearing nothing. Vorak watched the stars pass by outside the window. Somewhere out there was a galaxy full of beings who thought they knew what he was. They thought he was a monster, a weapon, a beast. And maybe he had been all those things once, but now he was something else. He was a friend. He was a guardian. He was a father. The Wanderer flew deeper into space, carrying a small human family and the most feared creature in the galactic dominion. They had no great destination. They had no grand purpose. They simply had each other dot, and for Vorak, who had once feared nothing because he had nothing to lose. That was more than enough dot, it was everything. He had finally learned what the Corvani could never teach him, that the things worth having were the things that made you afraid to lose them. Fear was not weakness. Fear was proof that something mattered. Emma mattered. Daniel mattered. This small, strange, beautiful family mattered. And the Warbeast, who had once feared nothing, now understood that having something to fear was the greatest gift he had ever received.